guys. Welcome to Collector's Corner for Operation Armor 2021. I am here with Dan Musick, who is obsessively, compulsively in love with the Vamp. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say.
Are you sure? Because I mean, I don't want to misrepresent what your passion is as far as Joe collection goes, because you do have a very extensive and incredible vintage collection of Joe toys.
Thanks, I appreciate that. But yeah, the Vamp has been one of my primary goals for the last 15 years at least.
So was that a love that kind of came out of a childhood thing, or was this just like an opportunity as a collector that afforded you the chance to kind of go down that vein of, of like a specific collectible?
Well, a little bit of both, actually. The Vamp was far and away my favorite toy as a kid. I mean, I would remember sitting in my grandmother's bedroom because we were too loud to play in the living room where the adults were. And, I would take my Vamp and my cousin would take the Stinger and we would shove them at each other at full speed across the room just to see which parts flew off. I mean, we played hard with them, but they were so durable. They kept coming back. Such a basic and essential vehicle for, any military team. And, once I became an adult collector and started to realize just how many uses there were of the mold and of the style, it just seemed like a fun rabbit hole to go down. I ended up going way further than I intended to, but and I'm still going. But it's been a lot of fun. It's given me something to focus on in a hobby that's all too often way too unfocused for me.
Well, it's kind of cool because for a lot of us, we've collected and played for a very long time with Joe. I mean, it's hard to believe that it's been 39. We're coming up on 40 years of real American era. And so there are some of us old people who have played and endured the changes in the brand and left and come back and stuff like that. But for somebody like who sat there and said, all right, I'm going to recapture everything from the line, but then to sit down and focus on something. I mean, that's pretty incredible, right?
It's been a fun feeling. And, there are a lot of guys in the hobby here who have done this same type of focus. Chad has the mindset of being able to look for the minute details that I can't even do. Roger Taft was a guy who was way into the Vamp when I started, recollecting as an adult, and I've learned a lot from him too. And there are many others out there, but those are the first two that come to mind when I start thinking about guys who kind of chase the same things I chase.
Well, that's interesting too, because it is always that idea that, there is always somebody who's collected more or have gone deeper, but that's never stopped you from pursuing, right?
Absolutely not. No, there's, generally speaking, there are a lot of these things out there. I mean, there are some examples from foreign countries that we don't have a whole lot of quantity in the market right now for. Some pretty rare items out there once you start chasing, the Fun School stuff, the Nilco stuff, some of the Hungarian bootlegs and things like that. It gets really tricky to track them down. And there are some things there, some opportunities I've had to pick some things up that I never thought I'd have the chance to own.
We'll definitely come back around to the Hungarian bootlegs, because I think that's something that the majority of Joe fans don't know that is out there. But as far as the understanding that there was the Vamp, the Vamp II, there was the Sears variant and things like that, stuff that we've covered in Full Force and the Articulated Points panel. But domestically, not a lot. There's a few variances, but foreign wise, talk about the exploration across the continents and stuff.
Well, for me, it started with the UK. I think the UK is a nice way to start an international collection if you're just getting into that area, because the stuff is in a lot of cases more readily available than some of the stuff from South America, India, Venezuela, places like that, where you have political climates that interfere with getting toys out of country, as well as, distance and space and all of those things. But for me, it was definitely started with the UK stuff and the black SAS Panther Jeep, the two different versions of that. And you know, they come in and they've got rubber tires and they've got just all these other little touches and details, and it just, you know, it had me chasing what's next, what's next, what's next, you know.
Two different variants of that, right?
There's one with yellow. Well, there are more than two variants if you include things
Okay.
like stickers, like that. They all
Right.
have that. They have paper, plastic stickers depending on the country of origin. But the two primary variants on the UK SAS Panther is one has yellow roll bars and the other has black roll bars.
Okay.
So
But
that's
all
the
the
easiest, most you know, at a glance way to look at them and tell the difference for sure.
cool. But like the UK ones that remade it so unique was that they had unique hubcaps and the rubber tires, right? Like
Exactly.
that was something that we poor people in the US never were able to get, the rubber tires, which
And that was universal to a lot of their wheeled vehicles. I mean, the
right.
MM had rubber tires over there as well. Their version of the APC had rubber tires. So, you know, their tire factory was just better than our local tire factory, I guess.
So the UK folks, they didn't really miss out per se. They just, you know,
No, they got a few were quite a bit cooler than what we got here in America for sure.
Okay. And I understand that you have in your hand a possible, was that a prototype or a custom of a prototype?
It's a custom of a prototype. So a few years ago, Dave Tree, in some of his research, unearthed the Special Weapons Force team from the UK, which was a canceled sub team. And that was where the Bombardier figure became known. It was the mystery figure that Ron Connor had on Yojo for so many years. And Dave found it as he was going through, I think they called it the Hasbro dungeon or the Palatoy dungeon over there when he was digging. And Shannon Pittman's a customizer and a friend, and he did this really neat custom of the Special Weapons Force Jeep from the UK. Gray and white color scheme, had its own logo. And, you know, it's just a beautiful set and a beautiful Vamp. And of all the things that we got through the years, I could never believe they never did a white Vamp. Arctic Vamp seems like such a slam dunk concept, and Hasbro or anybody else has never followed up on it. It's just baffling to me.
Wild. No, and that's a beautiful piece. Like, I mean, I love the idea of like taking something that was conceptualized, that was perhaps one or two mock-ups were ever made of, that were photographed, that, yeah, exactly. A great little like tribute piece to add to a collection.
It was a lot of fun. Shannon actually did the entire Special Weapons Force for me. He did the MMS and the flak that went with the set, as well as the Vamp. And, you know, he went the extra mile, went out and hunted down actual UK vehicle shells to repaint so that the hubcaps would be correct, the tires would be correct. And, you know, the authenticity is, you know, key for any custom that I ever want to own. You know, it's got to look like it's going to fit in the line. And, man, he just did a bang up job on these. And it's far from the most valuable Vamp in my collection, but just the care that was taken to make them makes it special.
Well, you bring up a good point about the idea of like what fits into a collection and what do you want, and to round out a, whether it's like a quote unquote fantasy collection or to fill holes that you may not possibly, you know, something that's been lost over time. Like how do you, you know, what's your, I guess, what are your brand rules for your collection?
They change all the time. I'm terribly unfocused, but generally speaking, you know, I started off, I only wanted 82 to 88. I only wanted figures. Then I'm like, well, let me get some vehicles here. Then I said, well, let's go to 90. Then let's go to 92. Then I wanted a complete master set. And then I started chasing international. I think it's just been me continuing to look for things that continue to keep me interested from the hunt perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, if it says G.I. Joe and it was licensed in some country, I'm definitely willing to take a look at it for my collection.
Cool.
I do enjoy customs. More than I thought I would, but they're going to be customs that fit in the line too. You know, a Tiger Force Warthog is one that I have that I really like. You know, it just those kind of things. It needs to be something that conceptually fits though, and that's entirely you know, based on my judgment when I look at it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's a kind of a good point, or a point of discussion almost, is because like for a lot of people, you know, people have a tendency to say my collection is going to be vintage or it's going to be modern or a mix of both. I want to be a completist, or, you know, like it's hard to define where you want to go, but it also means that you always have evolving goals as far as a collection goes. You know, you don't always want to like, I'm going to collect through 91. Well, okay, done. You got a loose collection in 91. What's next? And so I think that's one thing that me personally have been very curious about is just how other people collect. And it's not necessarily because, like, again, going back to earlier, there's always going to be somebody who's got just a little bit more than you, or it's got a little something special or something different. And it's about being personally satisfied with what you have. And then once you've reached that goal, what's next?
Exactly. And I think as a collector, we have a tendency to never be satisfied per se. You know, I found that as I have more and more of the things that I originally wanted, it's harder and harder to find things that I still want, that still draw my eye and still attract me. I'm dabbling in the classified line a little bit right now, even though as a general rule, I don't do modern. But, you know, over the last decade or so, as things have moved away from the getting and having perspective, you know, it's the friendships, it's the relationships that you build as a collector that really keep you involved in the hobby when there's not much stuff to chase. I don't go to conventions to buy toys anymore. I go to conventions to see that group of friends that I may see 2 or 3 times a year if I'm lucky.
Right. Yes. I totally relate. So I had Joe Fest a month ago or so, and that was great to catch up with everybody and to reconnect. And like, even though like everybody still communicates online, but it was just great to be in the presence of people and the kind of random aisle bump-ins and conversations, side combos and stuff like that. And also like, I mean, I think it's a big thing, but like that dialogue about friends and family and understanding just a little bit more that it's not just the toys we're talking about. We're talking about relationships and genuine camaraderie.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, there's a love there. And yeah, the G.I. Joe stuff is the tie that binds, I guess you'd say. And you know, you sometimes sit back and think, how many of these guys would be my friends if not for G.I. Joe? And the answer is not very many, because there was no means for us to meet otherwise. But once you get to know them, you can spend evenings talking about stuff that's not even toy related. You know, you've become friends and invested in each other's lives and in many ways. And, you know, to me, that'll always be the greatest takeaway. I could sell my collection tomorrow and I'd still be around for sure.
Absolutely.
Because of those guys.
Absolutely.
And ladies too. There are enough ladies. We can't leave them out.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's get back on the Vamp thing a little bit and let's talk about, so we talked a little bit about the UK. I definitely want to come back around to the Hungarian, but I think that's going to be our big crescendo, like big kind of end of it. So, but like, let's talk a little bit about, South America. Like what is south of the border per se?
Well, honestly, not as much as there are in some countries. Brazil's going to be your big shot there, I think, just off the top of my head. Now, I may look at my stack here in a few minutes and remember a couple, but Brazil had differently colored and slightly differently molded versions of both the Mark I and the Mark II. So those are relatively pricey, not terribly difficult to get in comparison to some others, but those are the highlights out of the South American collection for sure. I don't recall the Vamp being out of Argentina or Venezuela. Most anything that Argentina got, Venezuela got, and vice. Well, anything that came out of Venezuela usually was in Argentina first, as a general rule. There are some.
Okay.
Really, the hardest to find ones that I've encountered are from the India and Egypt area. The Nilco Vamp was one. I ended up buying mine directly from the collection of A.M.R.O.R when she was selling her collection off back in 2014. At the time, it was the only one I had ever seen with the box. Now, several more examples have surfaced through the years as sellers in India start to get the hint that we over here actually like that stuff and will pay big money for it in some cases. So there are more examples being found. People are looking harder. And I think the international collecting community is growing too. I think more and more collectors are finding themselves where I was 10 years ago, saying, you know, I've got everything I want here domestically. How can I challenge myself to stay involved? And I think there are more people dabbling in the international collecting now. Well, with India, for example, we know of at least 3 different variations of a bright green Vamp and at least 2 variations of a darker green version of the Vamp as well. And the darker green one was the one that typically ended up down in Egypt with the Nilco releases. But they're all relatively difficult to find. And when you do, you're paying $750 to $1,000 for a complete one, probably loose, no box. So they're fairly pricey, and of course that keeps a lot of collectors away. There aren't a lot of people involved enough, touched in the head enough, whatever you however you want to describe it, to drop that kind of coin. But the number is growing.
Yeah. As far as your personal collection, what are you talking about for numbers and different types you have? Like, what's your? I seem to recall something about 28 or something like that. Different variations. I don't know if that's
over 28. If you count the modern 4-seater, which I've kind of taken on collecting as well, I'm actually at, I believe, 53 different Vamps right now.
Wow.
And that those are all, again, those are variations that I see. I'm not detail oriented enough to go after minor sticker variations or even major sticker variations for that matter, or the differences in how the roll bar attaches to the hood, or there are differences in mold numbers that people track for the US version, especially slight differences in the dashboard on the original Vamp, and I believe the Mark II as well. And, all of those are kind of beyond my ability to focus in and actually remember and hunt.
But still, 53 Vamps. I mean, for the most part, everybody's kind of like, I've got 3, I've got 6, or something like that. It's amazing to think about such a wide breadth of different types of variations, countries, colors, and things like that. So what has been your pride? Like, what is the thing that you most proud of getting a hold of?
Well, originally it was the MSV, the all black version from Canada that came with the little all black MMS. That one was tough. And then getting the box for that one was even tougher. That's another piece that came out of A.M.R.O.R's collection several years back that I was fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to pick up. The Nilco Vamp was a tough one that was coming up. And then again, coming back to the Hungarian ones.
Yes.
There are samples out there, and there's actually a purple version that as far as I know, I have the only known example, but of course that's to say that somebody might find another one tomorrow.
So, okay, so let's expand on the Hungarian, because I don't think we're going to cover this at all this weekend about the Hungarian version, except for with you. So you have one in your possession, and from what I recall from other conversations, there potentially could be 2, 3, maybe 4 different types of Hungarian bootlegs.
We've seen pictures of a pink one. I have a purple one and a green one. I believe there's at least one other shade of green, and I think there's brown and red out there as well.
Wow.
And there's no guarantee that's all of them, because it's one of those things, kind of like the glass-like cheetahs from Brazil, that they're not G.I. Joe. They're not even, the glass-like cheetahs are from a slightly different mold, but they look a whole heck of a lot like Vamps. But I've got the purple one right here. I'll show you guys what that looks like. As you can see, it's stripped down. It has a steering wheel, but no gas cans, no rear weapon. In fact, the hole's not even there in the frame. So it was clearly not from an original Hasbro mold, would be my guess. But the front end, and no matter what color, the ones I have all have these same stickers on the hood. So it was some bargain basement knockoff company, I'm sure, acquired a mold or something close to a mold that they could make, and just cranked a few out in whatever color was laying around, probably.
Yeah, even noticing like the bumper looks different, and the wheels, are the wheels different, or at least the hubcaps are?
They're actually a different. Let's get that back up there. It's more of a. I'm not enough of a car guy. More of a 5-spoke wheel as opposed to the little nugget wheel that you would see on the Vamp.
Yeah.
Later versions of the Vamp mold had the shovel on the hood and the bedroll. All of those are gone. Not willing to peel the stickers to see if the holes are under there or not, but I can tell you I don't feel them just from rubbing my finger across it. So it's clearly a modified. I mean, the front bumper, like you said, it has some detail missing there. There's basically no rear bumper there to speak of, but we do have the tow hook, and we do have the basket for the jerry cans, at least, if not the cans themselves. no weapons, no other accessories. This is the way both of the ones I have basically it came. And that's not to say that they lost somewhere in time, but I've seen enough pictures of them to think that this is just the way they were built.
Are there any kind of manufacturing markings, Hasbro things? Does it look like it's been rubbed off or scraped off or anything?
No, on the bottom, I see nothing. There's, I see no make mark, nothing on the mold there that would indicate that it was anything other. The one curious thing I did see, and if you look right over the rear wheel panel there's a sticker that says Safari.
Right.
And, there are some Safari style vehicles that surfaced in India through the years tied to G.I. Joe. A yellow Desert Fox is the most infamous of those. It's one that not a lot of people have seen. I've never actually seen one in person myself, only a few pictures here and there, but it had Safari stickers on it as well. So I almost wonder if there was some sort of connection between the two, but more likely just coincidence would be my guess.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea?
Graphic separation between India and Hungary.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea like when these might have been produced, or like are these 90s?
Newer. I don't think they're that old, but we don't know. I don't know anything specific about them, but something about the way they feel tells me that they were probably done in the last probably 10 to 12 years, if I had to guess, maybe 15. Mm-hmm. But that's just a gut feeling.
Yeah. Is it the weight of the plastic or like flexibility?
It is. It's a little bit lighter than your typical, what is it, ABS plastic they used for the Joe vehicles. It's a little lighter, feels like it might be a little more fragile. Just has all of the, the markings of something that was more modern.
Nice. Very nice. So, what else do you have to say about just like in general about your collection and like how you've gone about to systematically build it and display it? I think a lot of people have struggled and continue to struggle with the idea of displaying versus dumping it into a tub and shoving it in a basement or a closet. Like, what's
my personal philosophy is if you can't display it, you probably, I won't say you shouldn't collect it, but to me, walking into the room, seeing the shelves set up, seeing all the toys on the shelves, remembering them, being able to touch them and pick them up, that is half the fun of having these things. That's all the fun of having these things, I'm not one that can now I say this as somebody who's moved 3 times in 5 years, barely getting his collection back on display, but it is so nice to just be able to walk in. And I know people have space limitations and I'm still working on trying to figure out how all of mine's going to display well. But, I would encourage collectors that, not to really collect beyond their space, or if they do, they're going to find themselves prioritizing things. And like you said, sticking things in tubs and in bunker, in boxes and sticking them under beds or in closets or God forbid an attic where they're all going to turn yellow.
Right. Yes, I can relate to some of that.
And even as carefully as we tried to pack my collection, we found I bet I've got a half dozen items I'm going to have to rebuy now because they were broken during transit or whatever. No. So there's always a risk. To me, the longer something's in storage, the more it's at risk of having something like that happen. It shifts, the box gets kicked, whatever. But for me, the joy is not just having it; it's being able to have it up. Having everybody come to the house and my non-collecting friends walk into the room and they're like, "Dear Lord, man." It's pretty fun to watch their reactions the first time they see all of this stuff because I don't just collect Joe. I collect Transformers, He-Man, a little bit of Star Wars, a lot of the smaller 80s properties. I've actually got all of that stuff's probably a collection collectively half the size of my Joe collection again.
Wow. So, because that was another question
for me,
I was going to ask.
It's been, I financially, I was going to do custom shelving, but I just went, you can see them behind me here, the standard old Billy bookcases, $45 at IKEA. You just buy them, you line them up. If you decide you've got some nice stuff you want to have under glass, you can put doors on them. For me, that's the best display model I've been able to come up with. It's consistent, it's easy, it's cost effective. And, when you line enough of them up in a row, it makes a pretty nice looking display.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's great. Um, I mean, honestly, this has been wonderful, very insightful. Like we can go and like I probably have another 100 more questions to ask you about the Hungarian stuff. But we are trying to keep everything to kind of some type of time constraints. But thank you. I appreciate you sharing your collection, your passion for the Vamp. I know that also you and I share the love for rock and roll, not just the music, but the Joe character. And so hopefully some other time we'll be able to jump on and talk about rock and roll and some of our other, loves for some of the other great characters and stuff. But man,
Absolutely.
I'll tell you what, Dan, I got to really know you over the years through different conventions. I'm glad I got to know you. Thank you for coming to Iowa every year and supporting A.R. and Codename Iowa and being a guest on A.M.R.O.R this year. This has been a blast. And selfishly, I love looking at the shelves right behind you. So this has been a good
Brian,
time.
you put on a heck of a show. I heavily encourage anybody who hasn't been able to make one, get up there and check it out, see what it's all about. It's a great show, one of my favorite weekends of the year every year. And I appreciate you taking the time to bring me on.
Man, thank you. Thank you for
You're
everything,
welcome.
man.
You're
All right.
welcome.
We'll talk to you soon.